Hey gamers, Gecko here. Ever since watching Tiger Pop win Evo Friends, I've been thinking a lot about the way that we interact with characters in fighting games and the way that we see the characters that we play. It's not uncommon for some people to just have one character that they stick with for the entirety of a game's lifespan. Some people will find a character, play them, maybe switch if a DLC character they want comes out, but then never ever touch another character. And this is fine and dandy, this works for some people, but there's a massive hole in this game plan. Some characters are just bad at fighting others. Some matchups are just not that good. Obviously, in modern fighting games, it's not as bad as it could be. Looking back at old retro games, you'll find matchups that are basically impossible to play, or sometimes actually impossible to play. But for the most part, matchups nowadays are at least bearable if you're willing to put in the effort. Don't look at the comment section. But there is a way to get around this. If a character has a matchup that is just so bad, it might be worth playing a secondary. Secondary characters are characters that you play alongside your main character. Sometimes you'll play them for specific reasons, but the most common reason is to play them just because they cover matchups that are pretty bad. I actually have an example of that. As you may know, I was playing Unica for a very long time and have recently switched back to Giovanna. However, I still have Unica as a back pocket for a couple of matchups. The main one being Leo Whitefang. Leo is generally seen as Giovanna's worst matchup. It's not a completely impossible matchup, there are things that you can still do in it to win, but it's definitely the hardest one that she has. However, for Unica, she does surprisingly well against Leo. Her normals are a lot longer than his, her pressure sequence can be flash kicked out of, however if she's able to call it out, she's able to get very high damaging combos and very easy setups off of it. And because of her longer normals, she's able to force Leo to approach her. This means that Leo has to take more risks than Unica does in order to get in. It's a very simple way of playing the matchup. It's one that I'd much rather take than the Geo matchup. This is generally seen as the only reason to play a secondary. However, if you watch the top 8 finals of Evo Friends, you'll see that Tiger actually plays a couple of matchups that aren't necessarily seen as that good for ABBA, as well as playing previous matchups that they were playing Happy Chaos in. So why is that? Well, there's actually more reasons to play a secondary character in the middle of a set than just the actual matchup spread. You guys are pretty smart, so I'm sure you actually know this by now, but dealing with different characters forces you to play slightly differently. Characters can have the same game plan on paper, but go about it very differently. Alternatively, when they get their game plan going, what they actually do in that game plan can be very different. Let's take Happy Chaos and ABBA for an example, since we're talking about it so much. In modern Guilty Gear, both of these characters are relatively strong rushdown characters. Both of them want to get into the opponent's face, do a mix-up, do a high damaging combo, and then loop the situation if possible. However, they both go about it in very different ways. While both of them are resource characters that have to manage that resource in order to get into a favorable position, ABBA relies much more on being extremely quick while in her stance, as well as fuzzy mix-ups and relatively good mix-ups options while in pressure. Her pressure sequences aren't necessarily very long, there's just a lot going in on them. ABBA will generally do button into overhead or low, and then try to reset the situation. Alternatively, she'll get a knockdown and then she'll do a fuzzy overhead, or a left-right mix-up on your knockdown. She's much more O-key focused. She's much more focused on getting the big combo, getting the knockdown, and doing a bunch of damage from that. Whereas Happy Chaos is much more about pressure, at least in current Guilty Gear. You'll see a lot of Happy Chaoses do a button and then immediately go for a gunshot, creating a small gap in which the opponent tries to press a button and gets shot in the face. Frame traps are Happy Chaos' bread and butter right now. A lot of the times they'll do something and then just do a gunshot to make sure that they're safe, or to continue the pressure for even longer. It's not uncommon to be put in very long pressure strings and very safe pressure strings by Happy Chaos. From this, Chaos is also able to get reliable left-right mix-ups by rolling through the opponent. Two characters that both use a resource and both want to get into the opponent's face, but play about it very differently. And this doesn't even go into the fact of how neutral works. ABBA has some pretty big buttons, but generally once you get her further end of the screen, she's not able to do as much. Whereas Chaos pretty notoriously has decent full screen options, to the point where some players are able to play them as a zoning character. It requires a lot more work nowadays and requires a lot of meter, but it is still an option that Chaos has that Aber doesn't. Playing against these two characters feels completely different. In fact, playing against any character in Guilty Gear feels completely different from playing against any other. Having that shift in the middle of a set or the middle of a tournament can be enough to get you a victory. Not to mention, characters obviously have unique knowledge checks that are specific to them, which you can use in order to get more wins. I'm sure a couple of you winced when I started comparing Happy Chaos to Aber, but I really needed to emphasize the point. Characters can still have the same playstyle, but play completely differently. Before we get on to the finals point, I'm going to ask you a quick question. Are you subscribed? It's glowed. It glowed a little bit down below. Did you see it? If you didn't see it, you should click the button right now. If you did see it, you should click the button right now. If you don't care, you should click the button right now because you don't care, and that means it doesn't matter to you. There is one final reason that I believe having a secondary is a very good idea. There's a lot of smaller ones. Oh, they could be stronger than my character, so having them as a crutch could really help me out. They play a completely different playstyle, so having it change could just really throw my opponent off, which is more of an extension of the second point. They're really good in a tournament setting, and my other character's kind of gimmicky. But a big reason why I think having a secondary is a good idea is the flashbang. Some characters, especially in Guilty Gear Strive, are very good at just winning sometimes. There's some characters in Guilty Gear Strive that are so aggressive and so high damage that sometimes they're able to just kill you and it doesn't feel like there was much you could have done. They're not necessarily the strongest, and they definitely have downsides, but they play in such a way where they're able to take rounds from you or take entire games from you extremely easily because you made one or two mistakes. Having a character that is able to essentially just flashbang the opponent in the middle of a tournament set can really change the tide of what's going on. If you're playing a character that requires you to think and slow down and play a little bit passive and really do a bunch of crazy things, put the mental load on the opponent, randomly switching to Slayer could just have the opponent immediately crumple, because they have to change exactly what they're thinking about and deal with a character that's going to kill them in 2 hits. It's a seemingly underrepresented technique, especially because at higher levels, it doesn't really work as well. But if you're more of a mid-tier player, someone like me who goes 2-2 quite a lot, having a character that can just steal rounds immediately is an absolute boon, and will get you wins that you didn't really expect. In fact, I think it's so good, I'm gonna try the strategy out. This is the bit you've been waiting for, the bit where Gecko plugs what he's doing. We're streaming right now, and I, for the first time since he came out, am playing Slayer again. We're going to be trying to get him to Vanquisher, but there's a little bit of a catch. Slayer in the rank system is really strong, and I know that, and just playing Slayer wouldn't be that interesting. So, I've decided to handicap myself. This is a Varmilo FK2 that I got sent for a sponsorship integration that I've been procrastinating on. It is a levelless controller. If you don't know, I don't play on levelless. In fact, I kind of hate levelless controllers. So, we're going to play on it. We're going to try and get Slayer to Vanquisher as soon as possible. We're going to do all the placements. We're going to see how it goes on levelless. And it's going to be a good time. It's going to be fun. We're streaming right now. I'm going to be labbing a little bit at the start. And then we go into the actual rank mode and see how I do. Make sure you're there. It's going to be fun. It's going to be good. Thank you all for watching. I'll hopefully see you on the stream tonight. If I don't, see you next time. Bye-bye.